family to pray for me because, as you know, we have been studying. We started last week the launching of a very important subject for believers in the last days, and that is how do we face the last days knowing that the enemy, Satan, is hot on the trail to try to bring down God's people. Satan knows that his time is very short. What that means is that Jesus is coming soon. And if Jesus is coming soon, your enemy is going to try to take out as many of God's people as he can. And he's going to do it in multiple ways. Now, let me tell you how he's going to do it. But before we get there, let me tell you that for the next several weeks here, we are going to be looking at the Christian armor. Gifts that God has given you to withstand the battle that Satan is about ready and he's beginning to wage on each of us. Now, if you haven't experienced any spiritual battles yet, because you're new to the Christian faith, don't worry, because God is already victorious. Last week we talked about how we already know the end game before we got into the battle. We know that we're already victorious, and you're going to be given a robe and a garment of white, the robe of righteousness, and a crown. You'll be given a white stone with a new name. Okay, so we talked about the victory. So here's the thing. Don't leave here, don't enter this week thinking that you're already losers, because you're already victorious. Your job is to make it through the battles, because the war is already won. The war's won already. But you have to make it through the battle. Because if you can't make it through the battle, you're not going to see the end of this war. And this is where Satan will get each of us. He's going to try to take us down in the small battles every day that you deal in your life. Okay, so don't worry so much about whether you're going to be a winner. You're already a winner. You're already victorious. Your job is to put on God's armor so you can make it through the dark days ahead. Okay, now, how many of you heard the story, the Greek legend of Perseus? You all know Perseus? You know, I was fascinated as a young man growing up with these Greek legends. You know, Perseus was he was the son of Zeus, man. He was the son of a god. And he was tasked to save Argos from the Kraken, this horrible beast that was going to destroy the entire city and everyone who lived in it. Sounds a little bit familiar to the great controversy and what we're dealing with nowadays, right? So Perseus was sent on this journey, and the only way that he knew that the Kraken was going to be destroyed and defeated was to take down Medusa, the head of Medusa. So now, as a person, as a mortal man, he couldn't do it. So what did his father give him? Gave him some heavenly gifts. He gave him a cloak that made him invisible, a robe of righteousness, okay? He gave him a shield to withstand the fiery darts of Medusa. Sounds a little bit like the shield of faith. And gave him a sword. You know, Perseus was given all these gifts. He was even given the Pegasus, where he can fly on this mighty horse that had wings. You know, my daughter Cadence tells me, Dad, when I get to heaven, I want a pegacorn. I said, what is a pegacorn? You know, my daughter grew up loving unicorns. You know, I read the one text in the Bible that mentions dragons and unicorns to my little girl, Cadence, and ever since I read that text to her as a young kid, she has been fixated on unicorns. She loves unicorns. And I asked her, what kind of animal do you think God's going to give you in heaven? She says, a pegacorn. What is a pegacorn? She says, it is a Pegasus that has a horn. And I said, wow, that's awesome. I'm pretty sure that God's going to create one just for you, Cadence. And actually, when I thought about it, I thought, that's a pretty cool animal. I want one too. Well, here's the story. Here's the thing about that story. As you know, Perseus was able to use these gifts, defeat Medusa, and ultimately save Argos and save the princess Andromeda and defeat the Kraken using the gifts that his father Zeus gave to him. Now, that was a popular story that we know in 2020. How prevalent do you think those people back in the days of Paul knew that story? It was so fresh to them that it was their religion. It was new to them. They were talking about this. And so Paul, who is sitting in prison in Rome. Now remember, Paul was a prisoner for 2 years in Caesarea Maritima, right off of the Mediterranean coast there in Israel. Later on, the Praetorian Guard was assigned to Paul to take him into Rome. Now, here's the thing that we know about Paul. He wasn't guarded by the typical centurion soldier. He was guarded by the emperor's soldier, the Praetorian Guard. And we're going to describe what a Praetorian Guard is in just a minute throughout this series. I'll start introducing it today. But here's the thing. He was taken from Caesarea Maritima across the Mediterranean into a Roman prison where he sat for 3 more years. So Paul was a prisoner for a total of 5 years in a Roman prison. And while he was a prisoner, he wrote to Philemon, he wrote the letter to the Colossians, and he also wrote the letter to the Ephesians. But what's fascinating about this, while he was writing this, and I'm giving you a little background history because it's going to become important, he wrote a letter that precursored his prison days, and it was the letter to the Galatians. And while he was in prison and he was writing to the Ephesians, he was referring to many of the writings that he gave to the Galatians. And what we as Christians today, we have lost is the history of the sequence of the letters and what Paul saw while he sat in that prison. And so we come to a text like Ephesians Chapter 6. Now you tell me if this is not confusing. Those of us who have been educated as a young man growing up in the church, I would read this, I say, man, this is such a cool story, but I don't get it. So let's take a look at this. Go to Ephesians Chapter 6. And I was so grateful, thank you to my brother for reading the first part of the text where we realize that the enemy is really not those around us, but it's really Satan. Now, I want you to recognize something. If you actually read the entire text of the chapter, you notice that Paul starts off by talking about the relationship between husbands and wives, fathers and sons, children and their parents, how co-workers and business owners work with their employees, how employees deal with each other. And you ask yourself, why does Paul mention all these things and then he quickly switches gear and talks about the enemy is Satan, and then he goes into the Christian armor? And I just thought, well, Paul must have just been completely, schizophrenic. He was talking about different things. And then the light came on. I realized that what God was trying to tell us is that the way Satan is going to attack you is through your family. The way Satan is going to attack you is in the relationship between the husband and the wife, through the children and their families. He's going to reach out to people who are closest around you, so your coworkers, your bosses. So when Satan is going to kind of infiltrate into your life, he just doesn't come in from left field. He's already working with people that you already know. And so he says, recognize the fact that the enemy is not your spouse, that it's not your child. Your child's not wanting to be disobedient. Your child is trying to love you but doesn't know how to deal with you because you're provoking them to anger, Paul says. Recognize that the real enemy is Satan working behind the scenes to try to bring schism between the family, the child, those of you at work who are being ridiculed, who are being demoralized, who are being oppressed. Even in our society and our neighborhoods today, I can't even go out without looking for little sirens and lights. And I have to remind myself that the battle is not with law enforcement or intelligence agencies. It's the force behind that's moving. Because for every bad cop, there's like 3 good cops. So how do you find the balance? And so God is trying to tell us in Ephesians to get your mind straight and see things through his eyes. Remove your lens on your expectation. Have no expectation of anyone except your own relationship with Jesus. And so he goes on in verse 13. Okay, so this is the part where as a young guy growing up in college, I was saying, man, this is really cool. Okay, wherefore, take unto you the whole armor of God. I love it, armor of God. I can deal with the armor. That you may be able to withstand in the evil day. So you notice that he's very specific, not only about the history of the Christian church, but he's pinpointing, God is using a time period in the future. There's going to come an evil day where Satan is going to really pull out all the stops and he's going to attack God's people. So we're talking about putting on Christian armor to deal with dark days. And you know what? Now is that day. We are in the dark days now. I believe Jesus could be coming in my lifetime. And if you don't believe it, just open the news and look around you. People are going crazy. And if you don't still believe it, just I would like to invite you to a national conference call that I get to go on with emergency managers around the nation. The country is on the precipice of total anarchy right now because of the national election. Now, we've always had contentious elections, but never before have we had prepositioned deployments of Army and National Guard ready for the riots and the protests that will occur in Washington, D.C. Okay, these are unprecedented times. And while we're talking about this, let's not forget the fact that China and Russia are trying to look for all the weaknesses of the United States right now. And did I mention about the economic collapse? I mean, you can't even find coins when you go to a place like 7-Eleven or to QT. You can't find coins anymore. And where's all this money, the stimulus money coming from? We're already, Pastor Bursma talked about the figures. Pastor, tell me, how much are we in debt now? It's rolling so fast, it's somewhere like what, $28 trillion. This country's not making that kind of money. Where's that money going to come from? It's going to come from somewhere. Maybe monopoly money. So guess what? The Bible already predicts there's going to be an economic collapse. And in that economic collapse, if you don't receive the mark of the beast, you can't buy or sell. So we know that Satan is going to use the economy to try to whittle his way into God's people and make you dependent on the beast. Now, if you don't get anything from what I'm saying today, here's my point. Don't be dependent on the beast. You can't be dependent on a Babylonian institution. You know what a Babylonian institution? It's these institutions that do not serve and recognize the God of heaven. They're self-serving. These are agencies and businesses and corporations and institutions and governments that do everything to undermine and demoralize people and undermine God's gift of life and who you are as a person, your self-worth. That is a Babylonian institution. That is the beast. Don't succumb to the beast. That means you have to be ready now. And a part of that is putting on the armor. So here we go. So we'll put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. It's a specific time in the future. And having done all to what? In other words, do everything you can to stand. Now, when I'm standing, I think like this. I'm standing. Okay? Now, if I'm going to stand in front of Satan like this, you know how easy it is to tip me over? Push me, and I'll tip over. So Paul was thinking something. He was in prison, and he was looking around him, and what did he see? What did he hear? He saw Praetorian guards. And when a Roman Praetorian guard stood, they never stood like this. Now, there's a lot of great research that has been done by Oxford University and the University of Amsterdam. In particular, Dr. Stephanie Haas, which I have to attribute a lot of the research that I've been doing to her writings and publications in archaeology that she has done. But another professor is Dr. Adrian, what's his name? Hold on, I need to attribute correctly. Because this is being recorded, and I have a lot of people watching, and I don't know if Professor Adrian Goldsworthy is going to be watching. But thank you to both of you for all the work that you have been doing at Oxford University and the University of Amsterdam, because I'm using a lot of the research that we have found and discovered what Paul actually saw during the day when he was writing the book of Ephesians. So here's what it says here. Stand, do everything you can to stand. And I'm going to show you what that means in just a minute. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth. Okay, that is the moment right there when I got lost. Stand with your loins girded about with truth. If you read in the King James Version, or maybe another version, it says, put the belt of truth. Another version will say, gird up your loins, okay, with truth, okay? I'm laughing because I'm going to show you an illustration right now, and I debated whether I was going to do this, but I think I'm going to have fun today. Okay, I'm going to show you what it means to gird up your loins and what it is not, okay? All right, let's continue. It says here that you have heard, let me see here, where did I end up? That you, wait a second, I'm in the wrong text, sorry. Okay, loins girded about with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, take the shield of faith, Okay, by the way, every week when I come in, it's going to be awesome. I actually have real armor that was made for me. And I'm going to show you some things that people don't know, because it was common back in Paul's day. So he can refer to object lessons. And here's the great thing about God. God loves using stories and object lessons to teach us spiritual truths. Actually, if you look at Jesus' teachings, he always taught in parables. So he referred to something, and it had a deeper meaning. So here are the things that I'm gonna be showing you week in, week out during the Christian Armor Series. There are some things that you didn't know. So we're going to continue on with this. I won't read the whole thing because we're running on time. But I want to talk about this concept of the belt of truth. What is the belt of truth? So, Brother Robert, you're in the back there. I'm not sure how the video is, but I need you to kind of get me a little bit closer here, because I'm going to do some illustrations, first of all. So I'm going to bring this board up over here. So I want to thank many who sent me emails and texts that said, we want to see a little bit more of you, Pastor Ed, and the illustrations, so don't use the PowerPoint. So I'm doing all of this off of my head. Okay, but I have some notes that I need to put up here. Now, here's what we're going to do. When we look at the text, gird up your loins, the first thing that you need to realize is that your loins is not this. Okay, my dad used to always joke around with us. He would say, my sons, come to me. And so we would all stand in front of my dad. You know, my dad was very Old Testament. You know, when my dad got upset at me, he actually shaved his head and threw ash on him. Like the Old Testament is like, man, he was so epic when he did stuff, you know. He passed away last year. You know, he's a great loss to my family. He was the patriarch of my family. But here's the thing. My dad would call us, and he would say, my sons, come to me. And we'd all stand before him. It says, from my loins you came. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, something I didn't need to know, Dad, but great, awesome, thank you. Come, my sons, you are from my loins. You know, my dad would say that, and I'm thinking, okay, so the loins must be this, until I realized that that's not your loins. Your loins is from your rib, the bottom rib, to your pelvis, which is your gut. So it doesn't sound as cool when you say, my sons, you're from my gut. Okay? But this is the loins. So when Paul was talking about the loins, he's not talking about everything below the belt. And by the way, what does loins have anything to do with truth? It's just, what truth are we talking about? And then when he talks about the belt, are we talking about these kind of belts? So, you know, when I was growing up in the 1980s, you know, believe it or not, these are belts that I own from the 1980s. Yes, I still have them. Because, you know, I grew up so poor, I didn't want to get rid of anything. But I can't even fit these belts anymore. This one I can. But this one, I don't know. Can I fit this one? Okay, you know. Okay, so here's the thing. You look at this leather belt. It's awesome. It looks kind of Roman-y. What does this belt have anything to do with truth? It's confusing. And so it's reasons like this that people say, man, you Christians, I don't understand you guys. You guys talk weird language. It means nothing to us in the 21st century. And you have your kids look at this and say, what? A belt of truth? I don't get it. And then what truth are we talking about? Is it the truth of the universe? Is it the truth of the laws of thermodynamics or the truth of physics and chemistry? What truth? Well, no, it's a spiritual truth. Well, maybe it's the Word of God. Maybe that's what God is talking about. That kind of truth. Is that the kind of truth? But God is already going to introduce that truth in the sword. The sword that we're to hold. So what is that truth compared to the truth that he's talking about in the belt? And so at this point, this is a point when all of us is sort of check out. And we say, okay, it's just kind of hypothetical. I'm just supposed to just be true, whatever that means, to be true. So I did some research. And I said, I want to know what it means to gird up your loins. So I did a lot of, as you know, when I went to seminary, one of my areas of specialty is archaeology. And so my wife and I, we had a chance to go to Israel, and we saw what the Praetorian Guard would wear. This is what they would wear around the emperor, okay, with their armor. So it was pretty cool. And I'm going to show you what the Praetorian Guard's armor is going to look like through these weeks. But I'm going to put this on. Oh, by the way, this doesn't look quite right with the tie. By the way, I want to thank Sister Sharon and Brother John Forster for giving me this awesome tie. But I'm going to take it off right now because it doesn't quite look right with this tie. So, okay, now those of you who are at home, you're missing all this awesomeness right now. But so hopefully you can see this. My wife, can you help me? Did you notice how I called my wife? My wife. My wife, my children are from my loins. It's so bad. That's what it's like to be a member of a family that's like from the Pacific Islands. Okay, so, all right, so isn't this awesome? This is a, wait, hold on. Okay, I'm going to stand here like the emperor. My wife is dressing me. Okay, so this is what, how does this go? Does that, okay, that comes around? Yeah, okay, there you go. Okay, now I'm going to show you, first of all, girding your loins and the belt is not what I just showed you, those strips of leather that hold your pants up. That is not what Paul saw, okay? So the belt that he was thinking about wasn't that kind of belt. You know, today, when I wear a belt, I'm keeping it in just to make myself believe that I'm skinny. I have to hold my pants up. I don't need a belt to hold my pants up because I'm too fat now. They won't even fall below my waist anymore. But I put it on just to make me think like I need it. That's not what Paul was talking about. So let's put that out of our mind for a second. I'm going to tell you what it was. But here's girding of the loins. So I was in the Holy Land, and my wife and I did a little research, and we said, okay, how did they gird up our loins? How did they do it? Okay, so what did they do? They would get it. Because, right, if you want to move and you want to work and you want to go into battle, this cloth is going to keep you from moving around. You need to be agile, right? Men and women did it too. Okay, so here's how you do it. You take the fabric, you grab it like this, okay? And then you pull it up, wait, like this, until it's tied up against your butt. Okay, you take the extra fabric. Wait a second, it's supposed to go under me. Okay, you get the point here? Okay, look how ridiculous this looks. Okay, I can't even gird up my own loins. This is not working out for me. Is this what Paul talked about? If I had to face Satan and I'm sitting there trying to gird up my loins, I'm a goner. Wait, Satan, hold on. Wait till I gird up my loins. I'm sitting there trying to pull up my pants and try to tie it. You're supposed to tie it like this, okay? You know how ridiculous this looks? Okay, this is not girding up your loins. That is not what they meant. Now, it might have worked for the ancient Hebrews because they had more stuff, okay? All right, you're laughing too much in there. Stop laughing, stop laughing. Okay, let's get rid of this. All right, so I'm going to call my wife up. I'm falling apart here. Sorry, Brother Robert. Friend, you're there. Okay. Okay, we have a mic. Okay, can you pull that up? All right. We know what the belt was not. And I want to dispel all myth about girding up your loins. Because there are articles upon articles, and people are actually taught this in seminaries, that girding up your loins is doing that. But no one has tried to do it yet. And you can see that it's impossible. That is not what Paul was talking about. You know what he was talking about? He was talking about the belt of a Roman soldier. So let's look at that. So as you know, the Roman soldiers had this. This was their tunic, okay? Now, the Praetorian Guard actually had 3 tunics. When they wore red, it was their formal. It was used during parades and when they went to war. However, when they were around the emperor and around the prison where Paul was, it was white. I'm going to bring that up next week because it was a part of their breastplate. Okay? And they also had black. Black was their formal. Okay, so this is what a Roman soldier, what Paul would have seen. Okay, now let me show you what the belt he was talking about. This is the belt that he was talking about. This is called a cingulum mitare. Okay, let me write that up here. Hold this up for them. Now, one of the things that you this is the belt that Paul was talking about, the cingulum militare. Let's go ahead and unlace it, because you're going to have to put it on me. So it was a leather belt that was made specifically. Now, the research that has been done thought that it was defensive, but this was not defensive. I mean, come on, think about it. You put this on, what is that protecting? Okay, if I took a sword and tried to go after everything below the belt, it's going to go right through it. Okay, look at that. Now, those of you who are here, you notice something about it? I'm shining it. What is it? Do you see the sparkle? Okay, what that is, this is an authentic cingulum militare. This is the belt of the Praetorian Guard. And guess where it was laced? It was laced around the loins, between the lower rib and the bottom pelvis. Okay, so I'm going to have my wife put it on. Now, one of the things you don't see here are the little studs of brass and metal, steel. This is symbolic of the rank of the soldier. It is symbolic of their status in society. And you might say, well, what does that mean, the rank and status? You see, in Rome, it was common for the Roman to try to achieve the Via Romanus, which is the way of the Roman. And the Via Romanus was based on some virtues that every Roman citizen and soldier achieved in life. This is what they tried to achieve in life. It was called the Mas Majorum. So let me write that up there. Those of you online didn't hear that, but the comment was, Angela's dress is still prettier than my dress. And I would have to agree with that. Okay, so this is what the Roman soldier, what Paul would have seen, and God impressed Paul in prison. And yeah, it's nice and tight, thank you. It's a girdle. Okay. The cingulum militare was a symbol of the values of the Roman society. It was what they would call the virtues. Now, they worshipped a goddess called Virtus. And God impressed Paul, and he said, you know, my people, if they're going to go to battle with Satan, they need to have the values of Jesus. And the Roman soldier would wear the cingulum militare, not for defensive, but for the simple fact that when people saw them coming, they knew they had status, they had rank, and the more studs and brass they had around them, they had achievements in the virtues of the Roman society. So let me write these Roman virtues up. So here's what they had tried to achieve. So many, hopefully you can see this: fides, pietas, religio, disciplina, gravitas, constantia, dignitas, and finally, auctoritias. These are the values of the Roman Empire. Now, fides was trustworthiness. Trustworthiness. Pietas was God, country, and family. If you exhibited loyalty to God, country, and family, you would be given a strip of leather that would hang on your cingulum militare. And if you achieved something in the society that gave you rank, you would be given a brass piece that you would attach to that strap. So that's why most of these cingulum militares would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different straps. So I would have 8 straps that represented the virtues of the Roman society. Discipline, gravitas is self-control, constantia is perseverance or patience, dignitas is honor, and auctoritas is respect. So this is the virtues that every Roman citizen tried to achieve when they lived in the Roman Empire. Now, God took that and he impressed on Paul, and he said, my people in the last days are going to battle and face Satan. But they can't face Satan on their own virtues. Because many of us do not have the kinds of things that we need. Now, you might ask yourself then, what virtues are we talking about? What virtues of God? So what we have to do is ask Paul. So let's go and let's talk about Paul. Let's go to Galatians chapter 5, and let's take a look at verse 22. So if you have your Bibles, now remember, Galatians was written before Ephesians. It was written 5 years before Paul was sent to prison. And in Galatians chapter 5, and you read verse 5, verse 19, here's what you read here. Now the works of the flesh, and you can actually replace this with the works of Satan, okay? Because Satan working in the flesh. Now the works of Satan are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, right? Envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do these things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. And you read a list like that, and you get all uneasy, because you think, oh man, I was dealing with something like this, and I'm not going to inherit the kingdom. No, you got to read this through the lens that Paul was talking about. He was saying, this is the way Satan is going to try to attack you. So he repeats himself in Ephesians and says, the way that you're going to lead towards idolatry and witchcraft and hatred and adultery and fornication and uncleanness is because Satan is working in your inner circle of family. The conflict between husband and wife. And all of a sudden, those expectations that you had are gone. So now you're more open to Satan revealing a temptation to you. Maybe you're driving on the freeway and someone cuts you across and you get angry. And you say, I'm gonna pay him back. So you go around and you speed up, you get in front of him, and then you slow way down. Right? All these temptations because you're frustrated. Okay, these are things that we deal with every day, the frustrations of life. But here's what it says here. Verse 22, however, the fruit of the Spirit is what? Okay, so let's write down the virtues of Jesus that comes from the Holy Spirit, God. So here it is. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering. Now, a lot of times people will replace the word long-suffering for the word patience. But patience doesn't quite capture what God is talking about. Because, you know, when I say I'm patient with my kids, that means that I'm just tolerant. Okay, that I'll just kind of overlook it. But long-suffering, that means that you're going to suffer through something pretty long. That's patience of God. Okay? Now, it doesn't stop there. What else does it say? Gentleness. Now, we're going to go through this in just a minute. I'm going to show you the application. Goodness. Faith. Meekness. Temperance or self-control. Okay, and then it says, against such there is no law. Now, why does it say, against such there is no law? Because the way Satan is going to try to demoralize you and oppress you, he's going to point you to all of the things that you can't do and put you in front of the law of God as a mirror and say, you've failed. You cannot meet the standard of God. Right? But we're not talking about your love. We're not talking about your joy or your peace or your long-suffering or your gentleness. And we're not even talking about your internal goodness, even though many of you and many of us are good. You know why we often refer to these things in ourselves? Because we are made in the image of God. We know and understand what it is to be these things. Even people who are hateful understand what love is because they were made in the image of God too. We're not even talking about your meekness or self-control because Paul says in Ephesians to put on the armor of who? Of God, which means that the singular militare that we are to put on, the truth, the belt of truth, is not you and your virtues or your truth. It is the virtues of Jesus Christ. So here's the thing. The next time you feel hatred and your expectations based on your family and your dashed hopes, all the things that cause you to be open to Satan's attack? Remember the cingulum militari, the belt of truth. Remember to gird yourself with God's love. If I can't love you with my love, I'm going to love you with Jesus' love. If I can't have joy in this world, then I'm going to have the joy of the hope of the kingdom of heaven. If I can't have peace now, don't worry, I'm going to have peace in the future. You see what I'm saying? And like I said last week, I beg your pardon, God didn't promise you a rose garden. That's why we have to be long-suffering. You still have to suffer through the battles, but remember, the victory's already won. But stay patient, long-suffering, gentleness. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. That's the only thing just too little love. Okay, I forgot the words, but you know what I'm talking about. We need more goodness, more gentleness, more love. And when we can't do it, we call on the belt of Jesus to gird our loins and give it. Now, here's the thing. Many of you still may not understand the importance of girding your loins, but let me illustrate a modern example. If you ride motorcycles, if you lift weights, if you do labor, if you're an athlete and you're in training, if you try to do a major military hike or you go into battle, guess what most athletes and trainers use? You know what they use? Without realizing it, they are girding their loins with support. Do you know what I use this for? Did you know when I can't lift anything? Here's what I do. I put this thing on, and where I couldn't do something before, okay, now all of a sudden, I'm stable. I can stand, and I have supernatural strength. I can lift this thing. Okay, this is too heavy, right? But, bro, come on up here. If you're going to stand before Satan, okay, and you're going to say, come on, Satan, come and get me. Okay, so push me. See how easy it is? Okay, but when you have the belt of truth, your core is solid. You're solid in Jesus. And now you're strong here in your core. Now, here's how the military soldiers in Rome's day would approach you. They wouldn't stand at you and say, come on. They would come at you like this, 45-degree angle, shoulder width, with their belt supporting themselves. Okay, now try to push me. Okay, well, I'm getting old. Okay, so he can still push me. He's stronger and he's younger than me. But you get my point. This gives you stability. It gives you supernatural strength. Now, here's the spiritual message. Thank you, bro. The spiritual message is this. If you want the strength to exhibit love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, don't rely on your own strength, but gird up your loins with the belt of God's truth, with his virtue. And guess what? When you forget, remember that dangling before your loins is the evidence of your life experience. This is why it's important to hear testimony in the church of how God is working, how I want to hear how God saved you and how you exhibited long-suffering, how you exhibited love and patience and joy. And that is like a crown in your thorn or a brass fitting on your cingulum militare. Always remembering that it was Christ who gave you that strength to make it through that battle. It has no defensive purposes at all, but is a reminder to stand firm, strengthen your core, get your balance, and be able to withstand the attack that Satan is about to get you. Now, you're not going to stand with Satan just like this, because the armor is not over yet. Next week, we're going to talk about the sandals of peace. I'm going to go a little bit out of order because soldiers would walk around with their tunic, their cingulum militare, and their sandals. And that's the other thing. What does sandals have to do with peace? I'm going to explain it to you because what you don't realize is that the Roman soldiers had a unique kind of sandal that was lost to knowledge. And archaeologists just uncovered them. And I'm going to show you what Paul saw when he was writing this down. This is the belt of truth. It is the virtues of Jesus by which all Christians are going to be able to withstand the dark days. Do not go into the dark days with your own truth of virtue, thinking that you are good in yourself, that you have your own righteousness, that you have your own patience, your own gentleness. Rather, when you take on and you face the dark days, you stand firm, 45-degree angle, strengthen your core, and stand in the strength and the virtue of Jesus. Amen? Now,